This is Macro Analytics, delivering frank conversations on global macroeconomics and market analysis, outside the mainstream, featuring discussions and debates between Gordon T. Long, publisher and editor of GordonTLong.com, and his guests. The content of this discussion is strictly the opinion of the participants. It is in no way a solicitation for business, nor is it to be considered investment advice of any sort. Always consult a registered investment advisor before making any investment decision. These discussions are extremely hard-hitting and terribly frank, and parental discretion is advised. Now, on to the show.
Good morning. I'm Gord Long with GordonTLong.com, and I have again with me this morning Ty Andros. Ty is the president of TraderView, publisher of the TEDBits website, and writer and editor of his well-recognized newsletter also named TEDBits. Good morning, Ty. Welcome back to Macro Analytics.
Good morning, Gordon. Thank you for having me.
Ty, I want to discuss this morning something that I know you've been talking about for quite some time, and that is leverage. This is a topic I hope to be spending some time on with my other co-hosts. But I wanted to kick it off with you, and that's for a number of reasons. First, I want our listeners to get a practicing Austrian economist's view of leverage. You're probably one of the best Austrian economists out there, but you're certainly, as far as I'm concerned, the only practicing one. So I'd really like our listeners to hear your view of it. Secondly, it's a theme of yours that you've had this year since you published a paper in January, which I remember was entitled the same thing, When Leverage Fails. And you've made a number of presentations, I believe, on this subject. The most recent, I think, was at Freedom Festa. Am I right in that last point?
You are. It's the central tenet of Austrian economics, and where a boom brought about by credit expansion always ends in a bust. And is the bust containable because it was pulled? They quit trying to leverage the society. Or does it enter into a point where, the currency and financial system fail? And, of course, it's the latter. And it's always the latter, Gord. You rarely can see any instances in history where the people that have the levers of power and the monopoly on money have pulled it. It's always forced upon them. And, of course, the leverage is lending and creating money out of thin air. And at some point, the leverage and creating money out of thin air which create malinvestments, that sooner or later they fail just because there's no increase in income to service the debts. We're in the greatest period of insanity in the world, in the world's history. It's unrivaled as far as I can see. Before it used to be regional empires, but never something global. And now it's just global. It's all through the developed world. As I'll call it, wealth creation fails. And, the work that I do, Gord, I think that the economies of the world are in free fall. And that's, you can see what's going on just by looking at unlimited QE, outright monetary transactions by the EU, the Bank of England's printing of money, the Bank of Japan. Leverage is failing quite quickly, so they really can't bring the programs up and then let them expire. They always have to put more, I'll call it heroin, into the system to get the same high or sustain things. And, most people are inside what I'll call the Matrix, just like the movie. And they're hooked up to notions and, mainstream views, and they're poorly educated. And so they're really in there as sheeple. And they're being sucked dry. Everything that they make or live or produce is being sucked dry. It's a type of serfdom. Serfdom in this case is debt slaves, as they've when they went from reserve-backed money to fiat money, they started having a tax every year from rampant money creation. And even though your paycheck may stay the same, it always buys less. And it doesn't mean you can't have the things that you had when your money was sound. You still can have them. They'll print up the money, let you buy them, and then with the power of compounding, people become, I'll call it, debt slaves. And of course, that's where we are today. It doesn't matter whether it's public education or buying a house or everything else. It's all becoming out of reach. And the farther and farther it becomes out of reach, the more desperate the middle class becomes. And they then become what I'll call something for nothings, and they hire politicians that, promise them something for nothing because they no longer can afford their lifestyles themselves. And I'm sure you're well aware, Gord, that we're in a period of, I'll call it, declining living standards. And we're just kind of waiting for the crash, aren't we?
Ty, we are in a crash. We've completely gutted the middle class, and I say the crash in real disposable income, and it's creeping right across the whole financial ladder. It all depends what you mean by crash. Have we seen it in the financial markets yet? Not yet, but we will see a market clearing event that will have to reduce the amount of leverage that we have in our system. Ty, you brought some great slides with you that I think you may have used previously in this discussion. I wonder if you could take our listeners through them, if you could.
Yeah, I first would like to read a quote from von Mises. And what's unfolding has unfolded many times in history. And Austrian economics is really the economics of common sense and human behavior and history. And here's a central tenet of what's going on. I'm going to read the quote. There is no means of avoiding the final collapse of a boom brought about by credit expansion. The alternative is only whether the crisis should come sooner as a result of a voluntary abandonment of further credit expansion, or later as a final and total catastrophe of the currency system involved. And that's Ludwig von Mises. And my additional notes here are we're in the latter. Catastrophe looms. All fiat currency and credit-based financial systems die in waves of insolvency, and of course we can look at that all around us, and that's why you have QE to infinity, because they've got to be ready there to catch those insolvent objects and replace them with fresh illusions of money.
Ty, if we looked at the definition of, before we get into the definition of leverage, the definition of insolvency, and you look at it in terms of current assets and current liabilities, you'll see the amount of government manipulation, whether public policy, whether the regulatories, or in fact through off-balance sheet, to have basically hidden insolvencies, deferred insolvencies minimally. But we should be facing right now massive bankruptcies, massive insolvencies, and we're not. And that's a direct result of everything you've just taken us through.
Like I said, we die in waves. These kind of financial systems and currency systems die in waves of insolvency, and that's everywhere throughout society. Everybody is, if you really look at our societies, they're leveraged at 300 to 900%. And the only thing that's holding us together is that the public really doesn't understand the depths of the calamity or the foul things that have been done to preserve the current system. And of course, those foul things get bigger and bigger every day as the insolvencies hit. But these are all a bunch of promises to pay that will never be honored. And whether it be, the youth paying for the unaffordable retirement benefits of the older generations, the baby boomers, or subsidized industries, it's just all completely an illusion. A lot of people would say that it's a black swan that we're looking for, something that rarely happens. I actually believe that they're very predictable. And we can predict catastrophe after catastrophe after catastrophe. And, the final, we're entering the final stretch, Gord. It's just now that we've got QE to infinity, whether it be in Europe or the United States or London or Japan. And, of course, these are, I'll call it the bedrocks of the global financial system, or their bonds are. And so we're really entering the stretch run. It's just they're going to continue to print money and take down bad assets, and print money and take down bad assets, and put another form of IOU out there. There's never settlement. There's really never a default, except the soft default of the printing press.
Ty, I just wanted to put some meat on what you just said because, I was reading the other day, I was going through European Central Banks when it published its first quarter financial statements, and right now it's showing, and I'll use U.S. dollars, $21 trillion in assets and $22 trillion in liability. I mean, it's right there in black and white in the ECB provided data, but when you get to their consolidated balance sheet, you find the numbers they bandy about in public to be only a ledger of about $4 trillion on their consolidated basis. And, it makes you kind of catch your breath because utilizing normal American accounting practice, this variance would be impossible, yet here it is. And it's just like staring you right in the face. And forget that the liabilities are greater than the assets, and forget that both have increased, appreciably in the last several years. And just concentrate on this, because it really goes to the point you're making here. Concentrate on the size of the numbers presented, and then ask the central question: who is responsible for these assets and liability, and where are they accounted? And you can see they're not accounted on the ECB as part of their consolidated balance sheet. And when you start to go through it, and I won't bore you with how their statement on recognition of assets and liabilities, that, by the way, I have it up here right now so you can read it yourself. But their rationale, like it or not, is that these assets and liabilities are not theirs. And in fact, we can only surmise that they're because they don't count loans, securitization, and collateral that belong to the national banks, or guaranteed by the national banks, that they're on their books, but in fact they're not, because they don't count contingent liabilities, government-backed bonds such as Ponzi bonds, regional debt that's guaranteed. So what we've done is, what it means is, we've created $22 trillion worth of money to put out there that's not on anybody's book. It's been created, and we have no idea what it's based on. And the fact that we would not hide it, that's the incorrect word, would account for it in this way, tells you the amount of leverage that's now being employed to keep this system alive. I'm not making these numbers up, Ty. They're that blatant. Everybody in Europe right now is just scratching their head trying to figure out what is going on here.
Well, it's the greatest fraud in history.
Exactly. Ty, I don't want to use the word fraud. It's only fraud if somebody's done if it's in fact illegal by would I call it immoral? Yes. Would I call it delusional? Distortions and misleading? Absolutely. It's all there, black and white. It's just that, Ty, I don't think anybody's got enough education to read anymore.
Well, I would agree, or understand a balance sheet, but if you tried to look at a central bank balance sheet, I don't think anybody could read it. And, when you sit there and you talk about 25 trillion in Europe, and this is a relatively new central bank, just think of what is sitting in the dark crevices of the Federal Reserve.
Precisely. The amount of contingent liabilities that are off balance sheet and guarantees that are being made by governments that are also not recorded is pyramiding debt beyond our greatest imagination. And I think when you strip inside the $700 trillion swaps marketplace, whether it's currency, interest swaps, that you will find that underlying a lot of those, and they've already started to surface in a lot of the lawsuits throughout Europe in the municipalities and cities that were using these as a way of self-funding.
Well, we're really in trouble, but let's just hope that people don't wake up too soon so we can all get ourselves in proper position to reap the benefits rather than be victims of it.
Before I went off onto Europe there, Ty, you were just going to take us through a statement from Bernanke.
Yeah, I'm just going to read it because it's such an impactful statement. It is the beginning of the end. I believe that gold and many things are going to start going exponential very soon. If the outlook, this is the September FOMC statement, and I'm just going to quote a little snippet of it, and then some other comments by Daniel Oliver at Mericum Capital. Here's the statement. If the outlook for the labor market does not improve substantially, the committee will continue its purchases of agency mortgage-backed securities, undertake additional asset purchases, and employ its other policy tools as appropriate until such improvement is achieved in the context of price stability. And basically, they put themselves a hurdle that money printing has no ability to solve. So they've given themselves an open-ended canon. They undertake additional asset purchases. That's going to be everything from student loans to, in this case, toxic mortgage-backed securities to, asset purchases. I mean, it's now unlimited. I mean, like the Bank of Japan, they're buying gold, they're buying long-term government bonds, they're buying corporate loans, they're buying stocks and real estate trusts, other private loans, and foreign currencies. Well, you can look for that list to come to a central bank near you and be expanded upon soon. And as Daniel says, it is impossible to overstate the importance of the above paragraph. Just as the Fed could never again substantially shrink its balance sheet after 2008, it will now never be able to stop the flow of printing without destroying the economy. And, Gord, we've been doing these collaborations for 2 or 3 years now. And, recently Dan Honig was talking about there is no exit strategy. There is no way to exit. All you can do is go deeper into the bog. And of course, this was all set in motion, Gord, when the United States closed the gold window at Bretton Woods II in August 1971, and the age of unlimited leverage and Ponzi finance was born, which was the seeds of the von Mises statement. And the crisis is unwinding of the boom created by unlimited credit expansion. Anybody who's looked at the amount of credit outstanding in the U.S. government or any sector of the economy, financial or non-financial, knows that more credit's been created since 1971 than the previous 700 years. And the markets will clear. There's no doubt about it. 40 years of leverage and Ponzi finance in a short period of time. And what's that mean? 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. We don't know exactly. We know the general direction, and we just have to sit here and watch it unfold. But this is not doom and gloom. The opportunities are as great or as enormous as the pitfalls. The greatest transfer of wealth from those that hold it in paper to those that don't is underway. And if you put your affairs in order properly, you'll be fine.
Ty, we did close to 100 audio shows on global insights that are on the archived all on at Gordon T. Long and also at TEDbits. And I think, Ty, the vast majority of them, we ended with a slide that says, don't worry, they'll print money. And here we are now in October. And in September, we just formally announced, both by the Federal Reserve and by the ECB, as you just spelled out, unlimited, uncapped, not even going to hide it. And we're going to print it until we get to a point of, in the United States case, possibly a fictitious unemployment number of 7%, which will never be achieved. Not even possible. So we're there.
Well, no, we're just the beginning of getting there. Okay, as you well know, Gord, there's $250 billion worth of student loans that are bad, and of course that'll be quite a bit bigger before this is over because those people they can't discharge them, and they weren't given the kind of educations, or we don't have the economy to allow the wealth to be created to pay those loans back.
The new subprime problem that blew up in 2008 is the student loan problem. And this one, on the surface, may be smaller, but it's much more intractable in that these are non-recourse. You can't get out of them even in bankruptcy, and they come due when you graduate, and they can't find jobs. And that's going to spill into parents who guaranteed, in some cases, these loans. It's going to get ugly. And, of course, the government will step in to bail that out, too, in some fashion.
Well, they'll just inject some more imaginary capital to underpin imaginary obligations. It's an epidemic, and, the parents guaranteed the loans with the idea that, we had a growing society, and they'd be able to be paid back. Well, those assumptions weren't true. And, there's a real reason why reserve-backed currencies in those countries with them, which are now the dodo bird, but, have more success than those that don't. And it's because if you have bad policies, there's a run on the bank. And so either you change your policies so that you're not, I'll call it, with the policies of insolvency, or you go broke. And that was forever severed. Everyone knows Tricky Dick and Nixon and everything else, but his biggest criminality was when he stopped the run on the U.S. Treasury, which was caused by guns and butter of Lyndon Johnson and previous administrations. But the Republicans took full, they were there right along the way. It was all bipartisan theft. But money has 5 functions. It's pretty simple. And if your money doesn't have these functions, and you can't store wealth in it, you can't store wealth in paper for the foreseeable future.
Ty, we're up against our hard line, and I think this might be a very logical break here. Let's just break now, and we'll come right back up and take us through these 5 values. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gordon.
This has been Gordon T. Long, editor and publisher of GordonTLong.com. New recordings are posted regularly and can be found at GordonTLong.com. New show notifications are available through RSS feed, iTunes, and other social networking venues at GordonTLong.com.